This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Hey, welcome everybody to another show of the podcast. We have a really good friend of ours, comic magician extraordinaire. Ladies and gentlemen, we're interviewing Ken Garr.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, please.
You know, you always did well with the crowds.
Yeah, thank you. They love me. It's great. Especially when they don't see me.
Well, it is true. Unlike some of the stand-up comics, it's a little more challenging interviewing magicians. I've done a couple magicians and ventriloquist because they're a little bit more visual. And it's not like I can say, here's a comedy set from so-and-so because magic is so visual. But in the case of Ken Garr, ladies and gentlemen, one of our oldest friends in the business, worked for us not only as a great stand-up comic magician and escape artist, but you also worked in doing close-up in the magic hat. So for those of you in the audience that haven't heard the term magic hat, for many years above the club, I had a magic bar that I used as a pre- and post-show venue for my audiences, and I love magic and would have different magicians come through and entertain the crowds before and after the shows, and Ken was always one of the best, if not the best. You did some great stuff, but I'm getting ahead of ourselves. Let's explain to the audience how you first came to work for me.
Oh, well, that's, it's funny because I'm trying to think because that's kind of a weird story because I remember one day I was hanging around the house and my wife goes, "You need to get out." This is before I was really working a lot. "Just get out of here, go do something." And there was a little local, I lived in Stockton at that time, and there was a little local magic club, a bunch of guys, basically amateurs to get together. And she goes, "Go to that magic meeting thing." I'm like, I don't want to go, and I kind of put it off. And I said, maybe I should just not drive her nuts. I go there, and one of the guys brought up at the very end of the meeting that someone was hiring. He goes, "I think they're hiring at this comedy club up in Sacramento looking for magicians." And so my ears perked up, work. So I was like, and I called you guys. I guess you'd already auditioned almost I called. It was Jim Jay's Clancy the Clown.
Right.
So I called him. And he goes,
"There's a name from the past, Jim Jay's."
Oh, totally.
Clancy the Clown. To explain to the audience, Clancy was an actual clown that did some magic, and I paid him to work. We had huge lines to get into the club on the weekends, and I paid Clancy to work the line and kind of entertain people with magic. And he was a mime clown. He didn't talk much, but he would do balloon animals and do little magic tricks and entertain the audience as they were waiting in line. So that was Jim Jay's. And so you got a hold of him.
Yeah, I called him. And he was kind of like, "Well, I think they've found everybody they need." And I just was like, I knew I was supposed to work there or something. I just said, "Look, you want me? I'm really good." I just told him. And he kind of sat there for a second. He goes, "Okay, then." So he set up an audition. I think I was the last one to audition for you guys. Set up a little audition. I went down and did some stuff and entertained a couple of your waitresses, and I was in. I think you worked me a couple of days a week. I worked Thursday and Saturday nights initially, I believe. I worked a couple of days a week there doing. Yeah, it was great.
Now, was
great
this?
Fun. Go ahead.
Was this at the Magic Hat?
Yeah, Magic Hat. Yeah, the Magic Hat. And I was impressed. You had little light switches underneath, the little spotlights that hit the tables, and on the edge, you had the tables along the two edges and tables down the middle. And you jam in before the show. It was a little more relaxed, and I could do stuff. But after the show, man, the place would get packed out. I'd be jumping from table to table. It was a great training. I mean, I was already doing a lot of good close-up at that point, but I got better doing that a couple days a week for quite a while. I can't remember how long I was there, 5 or 6 years, it seemed like.
Well, it was not only amazing to have somebody of your talent, but you always wowed the crowds. But what's interesting is that you did transition from doing close-up magic in the bar to doing the stage show.
Yeah.
When did that happen?
That was a couple years in, I believe. I always, I used to sit down, and like what was great about working there was I'd go and sit on the steps and watch the comics, so I could watch it. And I couldn't watch everybody. I'd watch a couple, part of each set, and then go upstairs, and start entertaining again. So I had a little break time between shows, and I kept thinking, I'm gonna put together a little act, and I could do this. I saw a couple guys, I bet I could put some stuff together, and it was just in my head. I hadn't really. And you came up one time. Someone got sick. One of the acts wasn't feeling well or something, and can you do anything on stage? And I'm like, sure. Of course, I had no idea what I was going to do. You say, can you do anything? I'm like, oh, of course I can. I'm like, oh, jeez. But I went up, I think I did 10, 15 minutes, and I had a great set. I was killing. People were laughing. I got hooked. I was hooked. And so I started thinking of material, and you started using me off and on, and I don't remember exactly when I opened a show for the first time. I think it was out at the Citrus Heights Club, I believe. It was the little one, the first club you guys had out there. I think that was the first time I actually did a week.
Wow.
Was out there. But,
and what's interesting is that I ended up leaning on you as one of my go-to guys, especially when there was somebody, a last-minute illness bailout, or there was times in the mid to late 80s where I'd have somebody booked and they would go and do the Tonight Show or something, and boom, they were stars and didn't want to bother with Sacramento, and I would have to fill these spots in pretty short notice. But Ken, you were much more than that, because you were not only one of the magicians in the magic hat, but you were also had the advantage of doing the stage comedy for, like I said, many, many years for the club.
Yeah, it was big fun, man. It was a good training ground. I ended up transitioning, going out and doing more clubs and one-nighters, and it kind of just went from there. Turned into a thing.
Well, we always thought of you as part of the Laughs family, and you were involved in a lot of the growth of the company through those years. But what was interesting that I was not aware of was that we helped you transition from a close-up magician to a stage magician to a traveling comic. So how much road work over let's say the late 80s and 90s had you done?
Oh, I stayed mostly West Coast. I would do these little one-night tours. I did, I know there was, I ended up doing clubs in San Francisco. Also, what was the guy down in LA? LA did stuff in LA. It was mostly California, but I'd go into Arizona, or then I'd fly back to Kansas City occasionally and did stuff there, my hometown. I stayed mostly West Coast. Yeah, I was busy. I was getting busier and busier. I remember when I trained with the club, I forget when Magic Hat stopped being a thing. I was there almost to the end of that, I think. But
sadly, it didn't last forever. It got expensive renting the additional space. The landlords saw this cash cow and kind of kept raising the rent. I had the Magic Hat bar, and then across the hallway, I actually had the Magic Hat Magic Store.
Yeah, magic shop for a while. I remember that. That's right.
Well,
that's right.
Not that I love magic, huh? But
subtle clues.
But it's interesting. I don't think I realized what a big part of your transition into.
Oh no, you guys are my. I always thought of you as my home club. Like that was my foundation, for going out. I worked at Merlin McFly's in San Francisco through that period of time too. So that was part of my transition too. I was doing close up there. So I was working almost 6 nights a week doing close-up magic for quite a while. So I actually kind of took a cut and pay to go do comedy. To tell you the truth, opening acts didn't make that much money back then.
No, I did. It was like $150 a week or something.
Something like that. Yeah.
$200
My
a
wife
week.
was really pleased that I decided to go into the comedy.
But,
good move.
So at the Magic Hat in McFly's in San Francisco, it was it was all tips, right?
Well, there was an hourly wage. I mean, you paid me, I had a base pay. So even if I didn't make tips, at least I made some money. But, it was good for gigs too. Both of those, I booked gigs just, someone would say, hey, can you come to a party? Or I'd give out a card. So, I mean, I wasn't doing tons of that work, but I would get jobs that way too. But and I had a couple other little restaurants in the San Joaquin Valley. So there was a couple years there where I was doing 6 and 7 nights a week of close-up magic, and I was making pretty decent dough for the time, you know.
So that made the wife happy. You're making more money and you're never home. That's like the perfect marriage.
Right. Oh, she loved that. Yeah. At first it was like, oh, you're not coming. Yeah. The longer I was out, the better it was. Like,
now, you did mention that your hometown is Kansas City. Was it, were they impressed, or how surprised was the family when you went back and you're a professional entertainer?
I think my dad, you know, I never really, you know, they all just kind of saw it coming. Yeah, we figured.
Oh, really?
But my dad was like, I think he was in shock at first, because I don't think he thought, you know, that I was going to actually make a living at it. I think he was really super pleased. I found he never really told me, but my brother said, oh yeah, he's super proud of you, you know, so that you're out doing it and finding a way to make a living doing what you love.
Yeah. So, fathers are that way. They're not always communicative directly on how they feel about
especially
something.
That generation.
Yeah.
So,
oh, well, that's cool that you had that experience. Now, you mentioned that you did do a fair amount of road work, but going back to Laughs, you were there as a magician in the Magic Hat, but when you started doing stage shows, was there anybody in particular you worked with that stood out? Any good stories?
Well, God, there's so many people. I think the first week, one of the best weeks, there's a couple of weeks really. I liked working with Dave Coulier. You booked me with him a few times. We got to be pretty good friends over that period of time, and he actually helped me. He actually gave me throw me jokes and lines and helped me develop like my old straitjacket routine. He only gave me a couple lines for it, but it really was like he kind of plugged in little holes that were existing in my routines. Like, oh, why don't you say this here and put this there? And so I started developing better material just working with him a couple of times.
Wow. We should
great.
Remind the audience, David Coulier, of course, from Full House. And then in more recent years, Fuller House. He also was one of the original hosts for America's Funniest Videos after Bob Saget. Dave Coulier and I were very close. In fact, he was at my bachelor party for my first marriage, and would play football with the girls on the weekends. He was one of our regular acts back in the 80s, but that's really nice. We've talked about in other podcasts the great camaraderie between the comics. And we had mentioned in talking with, I've talked to Larry Wilson already and Andy Gross, that sometimes magicians weren't given the respect in comedy clubs that I did because I was such a fan of magic. But it's great to hear that Coulier and others stepped up to work with you.
Yeah, I would run into that occasionally, but I'll tell you, I found the comedy world a lot more. I think the comics, because I was trying to do original stuff. I tried not to do, a lot of magicians do the same tricks. And I mean, I did some old standards too, but I got, I didn't get respect everywhere I went, but most of the places I did. But I found in the comedy world almost more open than the magic world. Magicians, there was a lot of thievery back then. It's changed now. There's a lot more originality going on now. Thank goodness. I found magicians, the comics were a lot more fun to hang out with, and they were better at coming up with original stuff, and they respected you for doing your own thing. I had a little different approach, but kind of a tongue-in-cheek thing than a lot of guys did, and I think they like that. And I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I think you were really good in relating with the audience that way. That what I remember was, first off, you have great bug-out eyes when you want. Not quite Marty Feldman eyes, but pretty damn close. And you always had that kind of. And it's interesting because I'm going to relate to somebody that there's really no relation, no offense, but Penn and Teller. Penn and Teller got famous because they would expose the goofy straight magic that a lot of people were trying to make a living at the time, and sometimes expose tricks. And it was always a kind of a wink and a nod to the audience that, hey, I'm going to let you in on the secret. And what I liked about your act was that you would say, and I'm going to do something really amazing. And you would give him this look and a wink like, right, like this is really magic, right?
Right.
And I think the audience appreciated the fact Larry Wilson was good at that as well. That, look, if we could really do magic, would we be working here? It's
exactly right.
So right. You, in putting it in a comedy format, you were really good, Ken, at kind of breaking that third wall and bringing the audience in as kind of like part of the joke. You did some really amazing magic. I would say the only person that I saw doing close-up magic that I would have to say was better than you was James Carney. Is that his name?
Oh, John Carney.
John Carney. So
John
sorry.
Carney. Oh, God, he's a legend.
John Carney was probably the best close-up magic I ever experienced. But and we're close friends, as I called him Jim. But John Carney. but next to John, Ken, there was very few that, and we had some of the best. Harry Anderson, Martin Lewis
was there. Martin's great. Yeah, well, there was some wonderful performers. Yeah, John's kind of he's a definite legend. I just saw him recently, and he's got a new show he's doing that's very good. He's a superb artist. So, a lot of magicians look up to him. So he's the real deal.
Well, so I'm trying to give you a compliment that next to him,
thank you.
You were one of the best. And I used to love your patter. And again, for the audience, the patter is the story a magician tells while he's doing a trick to kind of keep it entertaining. It's not just moving cards. There's a story and jokes and that was always the most important part to me, actually, more than the magic almost. So, and I think it is. It's true. And I have really fond memories of you doing, I don't know the name of the trick, where the kings would eat the queens.
Cannibal cards.
Cannibal cards.
Yeah.
Oh, you did that bit so well.
I won a magic contest with that routine years ago. Yeah, that was part of my award-winning routine. So
that's cool.
Yeah. So,
well, I always enjoyed your close-up, and I think that we helped you develop into a pretty decent feature act on stage as a comic magician. Yep. Did you have any... did you get a chance to work with Martin or Harry or meet those guys at the club?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they'd come upstairs and hang out. But, Martin, he worked your club fairly often. He would come up, and so several of them I got to be really good friends with. Martin would come up and hang out, and he was always very complimentary. And, I'd do a certain trick, and he was always like, "No, you do that better than the originator." He'd tell me stuff like that. And so I got pretty tight. Harry, I only met once. He was kind of a big deal already,
he was in Cheers and some other shows, had his own show, in Night Court, but we were lucky enough to work with Harry quite a bit. And but what about the stand-ups? You said Dave Coulier. Was there anybody else that
Dave
stood
Coulier,
out?
Another great week was Paula Poundstone. You booked me. That was a great summer that I worked with her. But we did weeks of shows. I think we did 2 shows a night. And all of them were sold out. And I think we even added a show on Sunday night that was almost full. I think we sold out every show but that very last added show, and that was like 3/4 of the way full. But that was a super fun week, and I got to hang out with her. And we got pretty. We only worked for that 1 week, and she was great fun to work with. So that week stood out in my mind for sure. She was super fun. God, just so many people though. Sometimes I get confused. O'Brien and Valdez were favorites. I was working with those guys.
Yeah. Well, like I mentioned, you were part of the Last Family. So I've told in some of the earlier podcasts that we tried to make their comics road weeks a little less painful, and we used to do things like go bowling. I believe you joined us on a couple of the bowling nights.
Oh yeah, I had some of my best bowling nights in my life hanging out with you guys. I bowled some good games. I'm not that good a bowler, but I remember
that just proves you can bowl good when you're drunk.
That could be. That very much could be. No, I remember I was hanging out. I would go hang out sometimes at the comedy house afterward. And even when I was doing close-up, if I was somebody I knew or liked hanging out with, we'd go hang out at the house a little bit or hang out and go out to the bar across the street or something and hang out. So I got to know a lot of people in that period of time. A lot of comics, well known, not so well known. Great fun times. I miss hanging out with all those guys. Tell you the truth. So
well,
I still stay in touch with a few. But.
And I do as well. And that's one of the great values of doing this podcast. I'm getting a chance to interact with people that, and it's so funny that it's been 20, 30 years in some cases. And we start talking, and it's like I saw him last month. I mean, it's interesting how time evaporates when you reconnect with somebody that you had a shared experience with, which, of course, the comedy world is. Well, Ken, thanks so much for doing this interview. I really appreciate all the years of service and friendship. Service isn't right. Entertainment, friendship. Sorry.
I performed a service.
Well, when you were working the Magic Hat, it meant a lot to me because my love for magic, and it was a big investment doing the Magic nightclub and then the Magic store. And it was people like you that supported these crazy ideas I had and the money I was putting into them. And I don't think I ever made money on those things, but I appreciated that you were there to do it. So, Ken. Okay. We've known each other for a long, long time. We haven't actually had a chance to chat real recently, but you were one of the acts that I continued to book into fundraisers after I sold the club. I consider you one of my oldest friends in the comedy business, and I've always respected your magic and your stage show, but especially the close-up, which always invigorates me. For this podcast, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me. Everybody out there, Ken's still available and working, right? Ken, you're still working?
Yeah. I've been working a lot. Working with Cirque du Boyam, the circus, in the wintertime. I do a winter show out in Sonoma from like the day after Thanksgiving through the month of December. So I'm booked for that again. So I'm kind of the ringmaster of the show.
Oh, that's cool. What's the name of the show?
It's called Cirque de Bohème. It's an actual French-style Christmas circus.
Kind of a Cirque du Soleil tent style.
It's a throwback to the early 1900s, and they used to do a thing. It was all World War I veterans started these things called Christmas circuses, and they would tour all over Paris and France, all over Europe actually. And it was kind of a French tradition at Christmas time. These little circuses would pop up all over. So he actually found a tent. And he puts on this old style, like early 1900s style circus. And it's very fun and very cool. This is my third year being booked for it. So
that's cool. And you're the ringmaster.
I'm kind of the ringmaster. This past year I played, it's kind of a little play throughout. It's kind of like Cirque du Soleil that they have a storyline running through it. First year I played a mad magician, kind of a semi-evil character. And but very fun. And then last year I was the main guy who thought of himself as king. And the story was about Notre Dame and how it was built. But there's circus acts all wrapped around the story. So it was very fun.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
Well, we'll have to come out and visit. Hey, thanks again for taking the time and doing this podcast and catching up. I know we'll be talking and working together again soon. I'm going to try to come out and see you at the Cirque Theater. That sounds like fun in Sonoma, right?
Yeah, Sonoma Cornerstone in Sonoma. Yeah, runs day after Thanksgiving through December. So, yep.
Oh, that's great. Well, Ken, continued success. I feel honored that we've had a chance to be a part of your early comedy magic career, leading you from stand-up, from close-up to stand-up stage act to what you're doing these days. I think it's sounds like it's been a fun road, and it's really been a pleasure for us to have you be a part of our path.
My pleasure, and it's been a blast. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you, Ken. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
This episode's sponsor is DR Design and Remodel. Flooring, tile, carpentry, and more. Located in beautiful Elk Grove, California at 10461 Grant Line Road, just off Highway 99 near Sacramento. They do amazing bathroom and kitchen remodels, from design to construction completion. Totally professional in every way. Their showroom features beautiful fixtures, a wide range of flooring, and design ideas to boggle the mind. Their on-site design staff will guide you through to see your dream home come true. So call DR Design and Remodel at 916-269-0451 to set an appointment or visit their showroom today. We want to thank DR Design and Remodel for being our sponsor.
So the first part of this podcast, I had a chance to interview our good friend, comic magician, Ken Garr. Now to fill things out, I have another wonderful interview. This Native American stand-up comic has been working for me off and on for several years. He first came to the club in 1999, but since then we've gotten to be friends. He's a very funny and clean entertainer, and he's done a lot of the fundraisers I've produced over the last couple decades. So stay tuned. Here comes an interview with Marc Yaffee. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest coming to join us on the podcast today. Here he is, all the way from Sparks, Nevada. It's comic Marc Yaffee.
Oh, my goodness.
And the crowd goes crazy. Marc is back in the house. Hey, how you doing, buddy?
Wow. I am good here in lovely Sparks, Nevada. I've been living out here. Bought a new house. I'm living the suburban life. It's quite the experience. I'm a comedian comedian / gardener now.
Well, I'm laughing but actually for a stand-up comic that, the successful ones like you, a lot of your life is on the road. And a lot of the guys I worked with over the years were not homeowners because it didn't make any sense if you're working maybe 36, 40 weeks a year, maybe more in some cases, you don't want to be paying for a mortgage. A lot of them were, sharing space with somebody else so they could keep their home rent as low as possible because, if you're on the road, you're staying in some comedy condo or some hotel or on the beach, whatever they do. Congratulations for being a homeowner. For those of you that don't know, Marc Yaffee is a very talented Native American stand-up comic. There's not a lot of those out there. We'll talk about that.
I think we're up to 7.
7. Well, considering the population, that sounds very appropriate. But Marc has been working for me for since the late 90s. Most recently, he is one of the best funny, clean, entertaining guys that I use for a lot of my fundraisers over the last couple decades. But back in the club days, Marc, why don't you share a little bit with the audience how you came to meet me and work at Laughs?
Well, it seems like yesterday, but it's 21 years to be exact. April 1999. So
wow.
I knew you before the turn of the century, and my journey to Laughs Unlimited actually started with traffic school. Unlike most comedians who were hired to teach traffic school as a side gig, which was big back in the 80s and 90s when people went in person in California to get a ticket cleared off their record, took an 8-hour class. I was working for the state of California at the DMV, and I just said, hey, I'm going to strike out on my own. My buddy said, you got to open a driving school. All the schools are dropping the behind-the-wheel training. So I said, okay, I'll do that, and then I'll teach traffic school classes. And for some reason, people enjoyed my shtick. I wrote my own lesson plan. I'd always liked comedy. You have a captive audience. I was able to, bounce a lot of good and not so good material off them. And then I said, I'm going to start looking for actual comedians to work for me. So I don't know if you remember the book of Robin Esperance. I think she was living in Fairfield at the time. You probably crossed paths somewhere in the small world of comedy.
But hold that thought. You used to work at DMV?
I was a DMV driving examiner for 7.5 years.
No, and you survived?
Yeah. Can you think of what the farthest thing from comedy?
And I didn't know that about you. It's so funny about when you work with somebody. I've known you for, like you said, 21 years, and I don't think we've ever talked about our respective past. I would not have guessed that you were a DMV drive instructor, and that is a scary, yet I bet you could get some material from it. It must have been, quite frankly, you seem to be a lot smarter than most of the DMV people I run into. But that's an interesting path to stand-up comedy.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, it was just all backwards. So I grew up in L.A., San Fernando Valley, right in the hub of comedy and entertainment. Wrote a few screenplays, and I wasn't getting anywhere, so I took a part-time job to the DMV, and then they offered me a full-time position in Lake County.
Wow!
So up in the 2 hours from Sacramento, and then I got tired of working at DMV. I said, I can't do this the rest of my life, so I'll open a driving school and start doing the traffic school classes. And then Robin Esperance said, you should go recruit some comedians at Laughs Unlimited. Del Van Dyke is over there, one of our Sacramento stalwarts, and he and Karen Anderson of Ellen Show fame and many writing gigs over the years were teaching a class. So I said, hey, well, I'm going to go recruit some comedians. So I might as well just go take this class. Maybe they'll be funnier when I get to teaching more classes.
Yeah. So we need to tell the audience, Del Van Dyke is one of the few local comics that was funny enough and had enough material to actually headline. But he actually, him and Jack Gallagher and Paul Robbins might have been the only guys that lived locally that could headline a show or had the notoriety to headline here in Sacramento. I'm sure I'm missing somebody. But Karen Anderson started off as an MC and then opening act and then feature. And then she went on to fame and fortune as one of the main writers for The Ellen Show. And very old friend. And these both Karen and Del Van Dyke approached me about, I was doing open mics and stuff, and they said, well, we'd like to do a school. And so I let them use the club because there's no better experience than being on stage instead of like in some hall or, some motel room. Why not teach it in a club? And I had very little to do with it other than I let them use the club. And Del and Karen were doing these classes, and you came as a comic wannabe, basically.
Yeah, and it was, and basically I wasn't even thinking I would do stand-up. I just wanted to try to be funny in my job and recruit some people. And we were doing, I think it was Tuesday or Wednesday nights, same night as the open mic. And in fact, your book was one of our first reading assignments.
Oh, really?
That was part of the curriculum.
Well, see, that's where I made my money. I sold my book. By the way, a little plug, be a stand-up comic or just look like one. One of the few books on stand-up comedy actually out there and available on my website. But go ahead.
That's awesome. Yeah, so I show up at the class. There's like 7 or 8 of us, and it's Del and Karen, and they're like, okay, well, here's your introduction. There's comedy. We're talking comedy. And then they said, well, and then afterwards it's the open mic. Now, I don't know if you were there that first night. I think you probably were, but I'm like, you know what? I'm here now. I drove 2 hours because every time I got a car to go anywhere to do stand-up, well, I hadn't gone anywhere else yet. It was a 2-hour trek. So I said, I might as well get my money's worth out of this thing, And I got on stage. I think we had there was probably 15 people in the audience that night, not counting the class. And I thought about it. Well, I'm going to go do this comedy class. I better write a couple jokes just in case. And I think I did about 3 minutes, and I think I got about 3 laughs. It was just enough to hook me.
Just enough to get you excited, yeah. Well, there's nothing like the feeling of getting on stage in front of a room full of strangers and then being able to relate to them and share something that makes them laugh. We've talked about it in several of the episodes, the adrenaline, the fun, the energy that you pick up from the audience that is shared between the entertainer and the audience. And what's interesting about the open mics, and it was normally Tuesday nights, was that we would filter through sometimes 20, 30 people and give them an opportunity from 3 to 5 minutes, I think it was, on stage. And quite frankly, many of them were absolutely horrible. But the ones that seemed really either serious or actually had some natural talent, both the comedy school and me watching the open micers open up an opportunity for me to find opening act MCs. That's kind of the basis or first base, if you want, to the building something that might happen or turn into a career, which it sounds like it did for you.
Well, I actually, I think you hired me I was 4 or 5 months in, and there might have been a fallout or something, and you actually gave me my first paid club gig, and that was terrifying / exhilarating. The smart move I made was I didn't invite any family out, and my ex-wife at the time wasn't going to drive 2 hours to hear me struggle for 5 minutes, but when it was, there's a whole different level. People know if you've been to an open mic versus a booked show on a weekend, and that was just like, I thought I'd won the Kentucky Derby, I felt like a Triple Crown winner. I'm like, I'm getting paid to do this thing, and it was terrifying, but at the same time, it was just like, you never forget your first time in front of the, a club audience. And I wasn't very good, but I had just enough nuggets. I always notice about open mic. You see, usually there can be a lot of awful material that will come through there, and guys and women that just aren't quite going to be there. But almost everyone has one or two good nuggets, and I think something about the rest of their 5 or 6 minutes might just be horrific. But yeah, I had those nuggets, and I just built on them. And I always loved writing, and you were very encouraging, and Del was encouraging. It was a nurturing environment, and I couldn't be more thankful that I stumbled in there. It was such an ass backwards opportunity, and
I'm so glad that Laughs Unlimited and I could be there for you. And if you have a few nuggets of comedy, a few lines, and by the way, I want to stress that these have to be original lines. One of the things that was important about the open mic nights is we would often catch people doing bits, borrowed or stolen from other entertainers. And we repurposed. There you go. That's the polite way to put it. And we would stop them cold and say, look, if you're serious about doing this and you ever want to get back up on this stage, write your own stuff. Funny or not funny, you have to develop your own material. And we were very particular about that. And this is the first time I've mentioned this in the podcast, but a lot of the clubs, the owners weren't active in the open mic nights. It was kind of an off night. You're getting a couple bucks at the door per person, and you hope to sell a few drinks. And like you said, the crowds weren't very big, 15, 20 people. So the owners would not normally be there. I was such a fan of stand-up comedy. I was so involved in my club that I did make most of the open mics, I think all of them, but I will say most of them. And it was important to me that we were pure about what we were offering and then also what we were expecting. And a lot of times I would sit down the open micers and say, look, you don't have to be funny for the full 5 minutes when you're just getting started. Find something about you, talk about your life, something original. And what you were saying is a nugget. Now, in your case, being Native American background, certainly those opportunities for nuggets were hopefully a little easier for you.
I think I really had a advantage with that, because one, Dale and Karen and yourself, you guys all stressed to be original, to be clean, because, a lot of people, they don't have mentors, they don't have club owners that would give them the time of day. And, you couldn't have been more generous and with time and some commentary. You actually listened to my set. And when I remember I came back to the sound booth, it was almost like, okay, it's like going to the confessional, and it's like, oh, okay. But it's just those little tweaks. You don't understand a word here, a sentence here. Hey, Mark, you I don't know what you were doing with that mic cord. You didn't, you're not really making eye contact. I remember I wore my glasses. I think you might have been one of the first people to say, you might want to take your glasses off. I had glasses and a goatee. I looked at one of my early headshots. I looked like I was auditioning for a role in an accounting firm or something. I don't know.
Right. And the look sometimes has a lot to do with the audience accepting you or not accepting you. But it is true that, and I'm glad you mentioned this, that unlike other clubs, again, I hope it's not coming across as bragging or boasting, but we had a serious interest in stand-up comedy and the purity of the entertainment value. And we did really push clean comedy. And that's because back in the 80s and 90s, especially in the 80s, a lot of the guys we worked with went on to The Tonight Show or stars of sitcoms, your Bob Saget's, Dave Coulier, Gary Shandling, Dana Carvey. I can go on and on.
Well, you walk into the front of your club and you see that wall with those, just a pantheon of sitcom stars and comedy legends. It's like, this is serious. It was pretty intimidating.
And those people got where they got because they could do a clean set. Now, they're not always clean all the time. As we know, Bob Saget's one of the filthiest stand-up comics.
Right.
And then he's America's dad on Full House. But it was important to me in interacting with especially the open micers, but anybody that worked for me, that you keep it clean. And I'll give you one quick side story, mostly for the audience's benefit, and you've seen this being a stand-up comic, it is so frustrating when you're trying to present professional entertainment that people have paid for, and you have some joker goes up and it's just F-bomb, F-bomb, F-ing this, F-ing that. I went to the F-ing store to get some F-ing bread, and it's like, that's not comedy. That's not funny. Yeah, the audience may react. You're going to get some sort of reaction from the audience, but that's not what we're going for. That's not what's going to take you to being on a sitcom or on a Tonight Show visit. You have to have some benefit to the story, something that is relatable to the audience, and just dropping F-bombs right and left is not a way to entertain in my mind. Now, again, I might be alone. There's a lot of angry, dirty comics out there that would argue with me and say that comedy is free speech and expression, and if I want to swear, that's what I get to do. And I go, well, these people paid $20 to see you. I think they have something to say about it. And
there's the art of comedy, and there's the business of comedy.
There you go.
They're not always running on parallel tracks. So.
Exactly. Well, and then I took it a little bit farther and said, well, it's not only the audience is paying for you, I'm paying you. So you work in my guidelines or you don't work. And there was a few people that didn't, but we've gotten off track. I am so glad that we had such an important part of your life. Now, was there anybody you ended up working with at Laughs that really stood out to you?
Well, you know what? I think back now, it's like all the bigger stars that kind of moved on. There was some, there's the Jack Gallagher's, of course, Del Van Dyke, but back then I didn't know better. We were, looking up to guys that were like 2 and 3 years in, which was kind of just absurd in a way. Because it was almost like, well, how do the next level to me, I wasn't thinking Seinfeld, Sam Kinison. I was just thinking, I want to be, I need to be as good as Mo Betterman or the local headliners and Tree and these guys that were these one night legends. So there's so many talented people that, never made it to national fame. But I think John Fox. I think I want to say I worked with John Fox at your club.
John Fox, perennial road comic. I'm talking. So here's a few quick names to rattle off that you may have worked with that weren't famous, but boy, they're damn funny. We're talking Milt Abel, Steve Bruner, Jeff Jenna. Mm-hmm. There's Bruce Baum. Even a lot of these people skirted success. They're successful. They skirted being famous.
Fame.
Diane Nichols as a comedian was right on the fringe and just never got that notoriety, and yet one of the funniest women in comedy. So
Sue Murphy, Dan St. Paul.
Oh, good. Yeah. All those people. Yeah. There's a lot of them.
So no, I get to work with a number of them. I don't think I got booked with any super heavy hitters, but I was grateful for any work I got. It was just like, wow, they're going to pay me to tell jokes. And I believe you made sure, and I know, and Del reinforces to make sure you tape your set. And I think that's something I learned in his class. And then it was really a learning experience. I had 2 hours to kill on my way home, and so that could be super painful too, to listen to yourself not doing so well over and over. But what a great learning experience!
It's really interesting to hear you talk, because you're reminding me of some of the things that we always gave advice to wannabe entertainers. I mean, you succeeded. You're a very funny headliner now, and has worked casinos and shows and clubs all over the country. But back in the day, some of the things we said was, read my book, because it teaches you a lot about what's expected in the etiquette of being a stand-up comic. But we always recommended that you record your sets, that you keep a notepad around. So if you have a funny idea or thought, you can write it down, jot it down. In fact, especially in the open mics, I had no problem with entertainers or potential entertainers taking notes up on stage, because I had seen somebody even like Gary Shandling taking up some material he just written. And of course, he's not going to try it out at the Comedy Store or on the Tonight Show. He's going to try it out in Hoboken and Sacramento. Mm-hmm. And he would, read some of the material he wrote recently and needed an opportunity to just get it out there and see if it was going to go anywhere. And, if I'm seeing somebody like Gary Shandling reading from notes on stage, it's certainly okay for, Billy Joe Bob to get up there and uses notes to try to find his material, as you said, find his nuggets.
Right. And another thing is, you made the club available, or there was a couple comedy competitions, and
those were
definitely game changers too, because you had to learn to write your best material in a short amount of time, try to catch fire with the audience right away. I remember one time, you have some cringeworthy stuff you do early on. I remember I actually had the Mexican, Scotch, Irish, German, Navajo blues. I tried to do a blues song as the closer. I had the harmonica. I played like 4 notes. I ended up dropping my pants, and I had a kilt underneath because, I was part, Scots, Irish, and Navajo, and a kilt and a sombrero. I'd look completely gay or some crazy whatever line I said, and I unzipped the pants. And, you know what? That's not going to work. I tried that like twice, but I had the freedom to do that. And, some clubs that have said, we really don't want to see you here again unless you're buying drinks and sitting in the audience. But we were given thank God I was given the freedom to make some very crucial mistakes.
Yeah, that's how you grow as a comedian, is you have to try stuff. And here's a little tidbit for any wannabe comics out there, that if you get a chance to do an open mic, or you actually have a paid gig but you got new material you want to try, you close with your AAA material. You open with your AA material, and then anything you want to test out or try, you put right in the middle of your set. Because the idea is you got to capture the audience up front, show that you're a professional, show that you're funny, and then the end of the show, that's what the audience is going to remember. So you got to kill them at the end with your what's called a closing bit. And then in the middle, that's the place to try stuff and work on material and expand on material. A lot of times you'll write a nugget, you'll write a joke, and then you'll play with it with different variations or adding different things. And it builds. What might be an idea and 10 words might end up being 5 minutes of your half-hour set if you keep working on it.
That is amazing how you have that one topic. In fact, there's stuff I was pretty good at writing things down, and sometimes it would be 6 months later. So that joke, that's going to go with this. Oh, I put these two together, and now I have a 5-minute chunk. What were the odds? You just kind of keep some jokes in storage that were just kind of orphaned. They didn't really go with anything, and then they're like, oh, that's perfect. I'm talking about doing these road gigs, and then this joke fits right in there. So it was. It's really, the point is, like Scott says, you got to write. Save all your ideas. Try to organize them. That's always been my struggle. I can write. I got notebooks everywhere, and cards and voice notes, and it's really corralling it back. That's what I miss about the early days when it was go to Laughs Unlimited. I had 3 or 5 or 10 minutes, and my whole goal was just to make sure I memorized that and didn't flub that up and look natural.
It was always so hard from an empathetic point of view when you see somebody go up and he's halfway through a bit he wrote and he forgets it. He forgets his punchline or something. I mean, there's just nothing more painful. But going back to what you said a minute ago that I think hasn't been mentioned, that's important for people to know about stand-up comedy, as much as it involves drinking and laughing and frivolity, it's a job. You're getting paid if you're a professional. You have so much time to fill, and you have to do it in a professional manner. It's a job. And so part of practicing, rehearsing, writing down stuff, writing in general, trying out new things, interacting with the audience is all part of the job itself to make it a success. And I think that a lot of people that watch comedy don't really understand the idiosyncrasies of the different nuances you have to bring together to make something work. You'll see somebody like Robin Williams throw something out that's like hilarious, and you go, man, he just said that off the top of his head. And I go, bullshit. He's probably said that 100 times on 100 different stages, and each time he says a little different because he's trying to find just the right way to say it.
And he makes it sound like he just came up top of his head too. That's another.
Well, that's the acting part of it.
True pro.
Yeah, that's how I always thought comics became good actors, because when you're on stage, you're presenting material that you've probably said 100, 2,000 times, but you want to make it sound like you just thought of it. That's the acting part. That's where they're practicing acting, and then that ends up leading into, who knows, maybe being an actor or doing something. Hey, Marc, we got off track a little bit. I just love talking about comedy as an art form. But let's go back to you and your career. Have you had any interesting road experiences? I'm sure you've played all over.
I've been fortunate enough to do 43 states, 11 countries. I'd like to think, I'm not sure this is official, but I may be the only comedian with land, air, and sea credits. I worked cruise lines, worked for Holland America.
Explain the air.
Of course, land gigs. And the air was, we were on the way, myself and another native comic, Gilbert Brown, were going to perform at the World Eskimo Indian Olympics in Fairbanks.
Oh, cool.
No, I take that back. We were doing a show in Juneau. It was another native conference. That was a separate gig. We were going to Juneau, Alaska to do a couple shows. One was for the Sitka tribe, and then some other shows tied in with it. And we're like, hey, we should promote the show. We're on Alaska Air, and they're really super chill and friendly there. And I said, Gilbert, go up and ask it to let us say something about the show. And he came back and says, well, yeah, she said, if you want to go up there and tell some jokes, and since you're the headliner. So I went up there. I actually got on the little flight attendant PA.
No, they let you use the microphone?
Alaska Airlines. Yes. Yes.
I love Alaska. We fly Alaska all the time over to Hawaii. It's not only always a good, fair rate, but the people are really generous and kind. But to let you use the stewardess mic and do a bit, I've never heard that. So you are my first official comic in 40 plus years in the business that did land, sea, and air. Yay! Oh, I should do it.
Yeah. That's my claim to fame. Yeah. Oh man,
you're the only one. You're the only one. Woohoo!
You got to hang on to that. You got to hang on to any credit you can in this day and age. Let's see, another interesting one. I was over in Iraq in 2007, and we were performing at a Marine forward operating base in Anbar province, and they'd had some casualties a week before. So we said, well, we should, let's try to come up with something just to boost morale or something. So I was just thinking about it. I said, you know what? My hair was down past my shoulders. I'm going to shave my head.
No.
And so we found two clippers, because Marines are always giving each other haircuts. So no shortage of clippers in the forward operating base. And I was on a flatbed truck. It was like Bob Hope 19, they have the flatbed and other trucks parked behind all the Marines with their lights pointing at the back of this truck and speakers on the truck bed. And then they brought up a chair and I was telling the jokes. And then I shaved my head. Well, I had my head shaved while I kept telling jokes. And had the sergeant, and just hold up a fistful of hair. I should send you some pictures of that. And then,
the crowd must have went nuts.
Yeah, they loved it. And then about a month later, Stephen Colbert goes over there and he shaves his head. And of course, it's national news, because he's a national celebrity. And I did that.
But you started it.
I did.
And that's real commitment to comedy. I got to tell you, I love comedy, but I would never shave my head for it. That's incredible.
It was a little painful afterward because it was Iraq. We were there, I think, in May or June. So it was already. Oh yeah, I didn't bring any hats. I didn't plan that out. So my head was popping up like Jiffy Pop, my scalp.
Well, that's a great story and something I hadn't heard and I've never heard of. So you've actually entertained in a plane and shaved your head in front of and for an audience. That is incredible.
Performed on a rock in the Sierra Nevada mountains for a tribal gathering.
Wow. That's unique.
Just a rock and a bunch of people. Yeah. One of the tribal elders came up, gave a blessing, and then now for comedy.
Well, being a Native American comic, and we're going to play one of your sets here in just a minute, and people will hear a little bit more about your heritage. But I think that, and I'm sure I told you this when you were just getting started in 1999, that's really a hook you can't pass on because, as you said, there's 6 or 7 maybe in the world Native American entertainers, and when you narrow it down to comedy, I'm sure it's even less. And to have that wealth of material, I remember seeing some of your early sets. And it wasn't, this is no offense, Marc, but it wasn't brilliant stuff, but it didn't need to be because it was so funny. It was easy Indian heritage comedy. What I respect about you is that you've matured beyond that. And of course, you talk about your heritage and some of the, you've developed into a more sophisticated way of looking at being an American Indian in today's world and doing comedy. And I respect that about you. And that's why I still use you so much for gigs. But the truth of the matter is, it is something that there's a wealth of material on. I love, you didn't do it in the early days that I remember, but I know lately, because you work a lot of casinos, it's pretty damn easy to make some jokes about the Indian casinos.
Oh, yeah. I have a wealth of those. And then, the other one is the DMV. I started finally talking about DMV. I think I had post-traumatic stress because I never, like all those years you knew me, you didn't even know I worked for DMV.
No, I didn't know.
I didn't have
never
one
talked
joke,
about it on stage.
About that.
Yeah, now you never talked about it on stage, and that would have been a great position to come from to talk and write about.
Well, if you can believe it or not, it was actually very, I wouldn't say boring. Well, DMV is boring, but it was super. I think driving examiner, when you're taking out new drivers that are getting their license and they're terrified. I was in Lakeport, California, and there was no stoplights. So it was a town with just stop signs. So people would actually drive a couple, 3 hours from the Bay Area and Santa Rosa just to go take their test there because they thought they had a better chance of passing. So it wasn't. My life wasn't in danger too much.
Yeah, I could just see you as an examiner. All right, we're going to pretend there's a light over there flashing yellow. What do you do?
That's so funny because I was trying to come up with jokes about that. Fake pedestrians and
that's hilarious.
Stoplights. Yeah.
Well, Marc, thanks so much for sharing some of your stories and some of your life in comedy. I want to reiterate to the audience that I still book several fundraisers a year. And if you ever trying to raise money for a special cause and you need a professional, give me a call. You can contact me through the website. But this is my first plug ever on that. But the reason I'm doing it is Marc is one of those guys that I can always count on to be available. He works at a reasonable rate for the fundraiser so that they can make the most money possible. And then when he's on stage, whether you need 15 minutes or 45 minutes, it's good, clean comedy entertainment. I want to thank you for that, Marc.
Well, thank you. And again, you taught me, and Dale taught me just being in that club, the value of the flexibility. Hey, it's not about, my headline and my feature and my hosting. It's like, just go do the job. You treated fairly, which you've always treated me fairly. You get paid, something reasonable. And you get this beauty of comedy is we get to do shows that we love doing and entertaining people. And a lot of times we're working with great folks like you and raising money for great causes.
Yeah, and let's be honest,
I'm win-win.
Pretty cheap. You probably didn't get paid enough. But anyway.
I forgot that part. That was 21 years ago, though. You've been more than fair over the years.
Well, thank you. And I'm so glad that we were such a big part of what has turned into a very successful career. And thank you again for doing the podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to share a few minutes of amazing stand-up comedy by Marc. Marc, thanks for coming on the podcast. Everybody out there, be sure to listen and enjoy this set coming up from Marc Yaffee, very talented Native American stand-up comic. You heard him here first. And let's enjoy this set, and we'll be right back. Marc, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Scott.
I am not from the reservation. I come from a small fishing village on the Pacific Coast called Los Angeles. Born in L.A. At birth, I weighed 11 pounds, 5 ounces. Worst part was 11-pound head, 5-ounce body. I was a globe on a Q-tip. All my baby pictures, like. But my mom actually had an easy delivery because I'm adopted. My friend's like, were you delivered by C-section? No, court order. Navajo, adopted by a Mexican mother and a Jewish father. Yeah, I'm a bargain hunter-gatherer. Illegal too. Illegal too, Pro, because you no longer adopt an Indian child from their tribe. That is called the Indian Child Welfare Act, and they passed that law to protect our people from Angelina Jolie. I was all excited, right? I got on one of these ancestry websites. I started researching my family roots. I found out my Navajo grandfather had been a medicine man. I was all excited. I'm like, oh, this is amazing. Grandpa was a medicine man. Turns out he was a pharmacist at CVS. People find out you're Native. They got all sorts of questions. I got this here. Oh, Mark, you're Native American? I bet your children have beautiful traditional tribal names. I'm like, yeah, a little big mouth and grounded till Christmas. Oh, you're Native American. Can you share some of your ancient tribal wisdom? I'm not even from the reservation. I just make stuff up. Like, sure, ancient tribal wisdom. Ancient tribal wisdom. I've been through the desert on a horse with no name. Felt good to get out of the rain. Don't stop believing. Hold on to that feeling. The do-do-do, the da-da-da. That's all I have to say to you. I was working in Las Vegas. Guy came up to me after a show. He was dead serious. He goes, is it true, you natives in your travels, you're guided by outer voices? Like, yes, sir. It's called a Google navigation system. You know, you can change the voices on your GPS. I do it. I get bored on the road. I do that all the time. Put on the British guy the other day. You know, he's all formal, right? Just now entering the motorway. Put on the French guy. He was a little sippy. He goes, you want to go to Waco, Texas? Why do you want to go to Waco, Texas? They added a Nigerian man to the GPS voices. This Nigerian guy tripped me out. He goes, you will go 3.1 miles. You will make a right turn into your bank parking lot. You will withdraw $7,500 and mail it to my uncle.
Well, hey, I hope you enjoyed that show from our friend Marc Yaffee. It was certainly great to talk to him and catch up. As I mentioned, I get a chance to see him just about every year, but I still didn't know about his DMV heritage, so very, very funny. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed the interview in the comedy set, and earlier in the show, the interview with comic magician Ken Garr. Thanks for joining us for this week's show. And don't forget, if you get a chance, continue to listen, share, and review this podcast. Thanks a lot. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stand-Up Comedy, Your Host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.